Beyond the Rainbow was Clara's screen debut. She filmed 5 scenes for it. She claimed her scenes were cut after taking some schoolfriends to see it, although this was disputed by the studio and some critics at the time. Beyond the Rainbow still survives, but the only known copy is under lock and key at the UCLA TV and Film Archives. The film is long out of copyright, but unfortunately it has not been made available to the general public. Down to the Sea in Ships is the story of whaling in a New England Quaker community in the 19th century. Charles Morgan is a strict Quaker who owns a fleet of whaling ships. He wants his daughter to marry a whaler and Quaker as he wants a grandson. He is still upset at losing his son and daughter-in-law in an accident at sea 10 years earlier. Clara is Dot Morgan in the film, his granddaughter, and only survivor of the accident. Dot is a bit of a tomboy, whose only ambition is to grow up and become a whaler herself, something which is very much frowned upon in the community. Dot dresses up as a boy and stows away on a ship, ending up in all sorts of trouble. The film contains actual footage of whalers at work, and was shot in and around Massachusetts, New England. Maytime was thought to be lost, until an incomplete copy was found in the New Zealand Film Archives. 4 out of the original 7 reels have survived. Clara featured in it after signing a contract with Preferred Pictures. She was originally on a weekly wage of $50, still a decent wage for 1923, but a fraction of the wage she would go on to earn. The film was produced by the man who signed her, B.P. Schulberg. Maytime is a 1923 romantic drama. It is based on a musical of the same name. Ottilie Van Zandt is forced to wed her cousin despite her love for Richard Wayne, the gardener's son. Richard leaves, vowing to return a wealthy man, and eligible suitor for her. He returns to find she has already married, and, in turn, marries another girl on impulse. 2 generations later, the grandchildren of Ottilie and Richard, who have both inherited their names as well, meet and develop a close friendship. Their friendship culminates in the romance that their grandparents began, but could not consummate years earlier. Clara was still a little-known actress, so Corinne Griffiths was used to advertise and promote the film, as she was a well-known star, and considered one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood at the time. Clara was loaned out to First National Pictures. This was a regular practice by B.P. Schulberg, and Preferred Pictures in particular, as loaning out actors played a big role in the income of the studio. The film Black Oxen is named and based on the controversial book by William Butler Yeats. The plot concerns Lee Clavering, a playwright in New York. He falls in love with an Austrian countess, Madame Zaishany, played by Corinne Griffiths. Janet Oglethorpe, played by Clara Bow, is an animated and precocious flapper, and she is also in love with Lee, but he hasn't noticed yet. Unknown to Lee, Madame Zaishany is actually 58 years old. She has managed to retain her youthful looks by medical means. She has been using X-ray and glandular surgery. Lee's plans to marry Madame Zaishany are thwarted, when one of her former admirers reveals her embarrassing secret, and, in the end Lee discovers happiness with Janet. The George Eastman House retains a print of the film, which is incomplete, comprising of the first 7 reels, but not the 8th. In 2010 it undertook restoration of the print. The Gosfilmofond, the Russian State Archive, also holds an incomplete copy, consisting of all reels except reel 2. A 60-minute version of the film is available on DVD, but no complete version of the film is currently available commercially. Another film in which Clara was loaned out by Preferred Pictures. Helen's Babies is a 1924 comedy directed by William Sighter. It is based on the 1876 novel of the same name. Clara, again in a supporting role, this time as Alice Mayton. She doesn't actually appear in the film until just over an hour into it. The plot revolves around Toddy and Budge, the children of Tom and Helen Lawrence. Helen's brother is Harry Burton, a wealthy bachelor, who, never having had one of his own, claims to be an expert on raising children. When Harry informs Tom and Helen that he is coming to visit for a vacation, they see an opportunity to get a break from the kids. Unknown to them, Harry only wrote a book about raising children because his publisher told him to, and actually, he isn't particularly fond of children at all. He reluctantly accepts the job of babysitter, and is escorted by Alice Mayton, Helen's attractive next-door neighbor. It soon becomes clear that Harry won't get any rest, as the careless girls often annoy him by getting into trouble, or going through his possessions. Although they always try to help him out, they only make things worse. Harry is irritated by the constant attempts to comfort him, and isn't able to take advantage of his own advice on raising children. He writes Helen a letter, in which he threatens to abandon the girls unless she returns immediately. However, before he is able to send it, he is interrupted by a visit from Alice. She notices right away he is no expert on parenting, and invites him to dinner. Harry has a secret crush on Alice, so he accepts and tears the letter up. The children run away chasing a dog. Harry and Alice start looking for them. They come across a group of Spanish gypsies, and noticing a piece of the girls' clothing on the ground, suspect they have been kidnapped. Meanwhile, the girls are playing on the railroad track, and are almost hit by a train. Tom and Helen are on the train, returning early as a surprise for the girls. They are angry their daughters were almost killed and start yelling at Harry. They calm down after they see just how fond the girls are of him. This Woman is a 1924 drama directed by Phil Rosen, written by Louis D. Leighton and Hope Loring. It stars Irene Rich and Ricardo Cortez. Clara has a smaller supporting role in it. Based on the 1924 novel by Howard Rockey, it was released by Warner Brothers on November 2. Although not a lost film, it is extremely difficult to find a copy. Clara's character, Margot LeBlanc, loses her small fortune at Monte Carlo. She makes the acquaintance of Hugh Kildare, an artist, who hires her as a housekeeper. A gang of thieves set a trap for Kildare when they find out he knows a mathematical system to win at the gambling tables. Another surviving film that is unavailable to the general public. A copy is preserved in the UCLA TV and Film Archives. Another film, which is very hard to find a copy. A comedy directed by William Bodine. Newly rich Mark Hadley drifts from his old-fashioned wife, into a secret affair with Clara's character Leila Millers, a pretty French girl. At the same time he's trying to break up the relationship his daughter is in. Milt Kimberlin is a down-on-his-luck horse owner, but Rosalie, a cabaret performer, played by the lively and engaging Clara Bow, she doesn't care, and turns down the fancy jewelry offered by another character, the slimy Frank Gorman, in favor of a wedding ring from Kimberlin. Even though his finances never really improved, Rosalie sticks by him, only to get sick and die shortly afterwards. Kimberlin's luck changes almost overnight, and he becomes incredibly wealthy. This is yet another title that's unavailable to the general public, and the only known copy is in the vaults of the UCLA TV and Film Archives. A World War I drama. Frank Land, played by director James Hogan, is murdered. This leaves his sister Martha, played by Clara Bow, and her little brother unprotected. She soon becomes the object of unwelcome attention from Jim Howard and his half-witted brother, who was gassed in France in the war. The film jumps around somewhat, but the star and hero of the film ends up being Thunder. Described as the Marvel dog in the advertising. A 1920s lassie if you like. A preserved copy is also held in the UCLA TV and Film Archives. Capital Punishment is a surviving 1925 drama by James P. Hogan. The film is one of Clara's first starring roles. It was produced by B.P. Schulberg, and is now in the public domain. It was probably one of the first, if not the first film to challenge the viewers to begin questioning capital punishment. The plot revolves around showing how an innocent man can be sentenced to death. The prologue shows a youth, wrongly convicted of murder, being placed in an electric chair, with the governor frantically attempting to call it off. It ends with the throwing of a switch, to show the electrocution taking place. Clara plays Delia Tate in the film. In the main story, Gordon Harrington wagers Harry Phillip that he can have an innocent man convicted of murder. He persuades Dan O'Connor, a youth who has been in trouble with the police before, but has been reformed, to be the subject of the experiment. Dan needs the money for his mother, and also wants to marry Delia. Phillips disappears and is reported murdered. Dan is arrested when he tries to pawn articles bearing Phillips' monogram, and is convicted based on circumstantial evidence. In the meantime, Phillips and Harrington have fought over another woman, Mona Caldwell. And when Phillips is accidentally killed, Mona persuades Harrington to let Dan pay the penalty, rather than risk execution himself. Dan, Delia and a friendly policeman attempt to locate Harrington, and at last the prison warden gets Harrington on the telephone. Dan is flabbergasted when Harrington denies all knowledge of any experiment. He becomes a terror-stricken boy over the injustice of it all. Dan's death impends when Mona confesses to the governor, and a repentant Harrington is pounding the prison gates. The governor manages to save Dan in the nick of time, but he is now a wreck of a man. He needs to be nursed back to health before he can forget what almost happened. My Lady of Whims is a 1925 comedy directed by Dallas Fitzgerald. The film was originally 7 reels, but only a shortened 5-reel version survives. Clara had not long turned 20 when this was made. There is a 40-minute version available on DVD, but the UCLA has the 75-minute version in its archive. The 75-minute version was obtained from David Packard, a noted historian and film collector, in 1999. The clips you see here are from the poorer quality 59-minute version, which is available and easily found online. Aspiring author Prudence Seven, played by Clara Bow, leaves home for the wildlife in New York's artistic Greenwich Village. So, her concerned family hire 2 thrill-seeking doughboys to look after Prudence and hopefully persuade her to come home. The soldiers of fortune are Bart Greer, played by Donald Keith, and his comic buddy Dick Flynn, played by Lee Moran. They move into the same apartment building as Prudence, where she lives with sculptress Wayne Lee. Bart is attracted to Prudence. Although she is interested in Bart, she senses he is being paid to watch over her, so she decides to elope with another man, the handsome Rolf. Clara is sexy and splendid in this youth comedy. Her often commented personification of the 1920s flapper is on full display. Her masquerade party costume and makeup are terrific. Clara, with her light touch and young years, is flush with material that made many contemporary actresses of the era look foolish. Boyish Donald Keith, her frequent co-star, works very well with her. They were a great romantic team. But the most valuable supporting player has to be the quick on his feet, Lee Moran as Dick Flynn. He's a rubber-legged Buster Keaton. My Lady of Whims features its star in fine form, with a smart cast. Parisian Love is a 1925 romantic drama. The film was made by B.P. Schulberg Productions. A complete copy of this film still survives. Street gangsters Armand and Marie are madly in love, and Marie persuades Armand and other gang members to rob the home of Pierre Marcel, a wealthy scientist. The police break up the robbery, but Pierre hides Armand from them, because Armand stopped another gang member from stabbing him, but Armand was injured in doing so. As he regains his health, Pierre sets him up with the beautiful Jean Darcy, and Armand has no objections. Marie, jealous of Jean, swears revenge on Pierre. They meet, but he falls in love with her, and they get married while Armand is away in London. On their wedding night, Marie tells Pierre she has Apache blood in her, much to Pierre's horror, and her revenge is complete. And she then rushes back into Armand's arms. But one of her fellow gang members, an actual Apache, who helped her deceive Pierre, shoots her, wounding her in the arm. As she recovers, Pierre leaves to return to America, and Marie gets a divorce so she can be with Armand. Parisian love was lost for decades, until a copy of the film turned up in 1995. The film was shown to modern audiences in 1998 at the Pordenone Film Festival in Italy, and also at the UCLA Film Preservation Festival. The film is in surprisingly good condition, considering it is nearly 100 years old, and in my opinion, may be one of the best, if not the best, of Clara's early films. The Primrose Path is a 1925 drama, directed by Harry Hoyt. An incomplete copy of this film exists in the UK where 10 to 15 minutes of footage is missing. The UCLA Film Archives also have some footage of the film. This is one of the last films that Clara was loaned out for. During its last year of existence, Arrow Pictures continued to churn out largely unexceptional films. Unfortunately, this is an example of one of them, and done very little to further her career. It is a six-reel melodrama, thick with sentiment, and featuring Wallace MacDonald as Bruce Armstrong, a pliable young man having weaknesses for gambling and alcohol. Clara played the part of Marilyn Merrill, a cabaret entertainer whose affections for Bruce proved to be authentic. At a nightclub called Sans Souci, where Marilyn is employed and where illegal gambling takes place, Bruce slides deeply into debt with the club's owner, Tom Canfield, played by Stuart Holmes. He holds Armstrong's bounce checks to coerce Bruce, in order to save himself from being jailed, into becoming an accessory of Canfield in his diamond smuggling operations. Bruce also becomes embroiled with others of Canfield's group, and after two violent deaths occur in his presence, the situation becomes potentially ruinous for Armstrong. He relies increasingly on a devoted Marilyn for support, while trying to reassure his widowed mother, and crippled younger brother of his sufficiency in handling increasing difficulties. But that soon spirals towards a courtroom trial. Plaudits must go to Wallace MacDonald and Clara Bow, who played their parts very well, but that's where it ends. This film is best forgotten, and fans of Clara's films are highly unlikely to watch it a second time. It seems a little unjust that this film has survived all these years, while some of her films such as Rough House Rosie have been lost to the long passage of time. The Plastic Age is a 1925 film highlighting the flaming youth of the Roaring Twenties. It was based on the best-selling book of the same name. The Plastic Age was Clara's first big hit as leading lady, and generally regarded as the film that started her rise to superstar status, with much bigger titles not far in the future. This is the last surviving film that she made with B.P. Schulberg Productions. It was the success of this film which led to her being snapped up, and given a much more lucrative contract with a major studio, in this case Paramount Pictures. They knew they had just signed a star that would be a huge box office draw for them. The plot revolves around Hugh Carver and Cynthia Day. Hugh is an athletic star and freshman at college. During initiation by his fraternity brothers, he meets Cynthia, a popular girl who loves to party, and have a good time. Cynthia introduces him to the pleasures of illicit drinking, dancing at illegal roadhouses, and getting nasty in the back seats of cars. A love triangle develops between Hugh, Cynthia, and Hugh's roommate Carl Peters, who also likes Cynthia. Hugh's grades, athletic performance, and moral character all begin to suffer, due to his late nights of drinking and wild partying. After almost being arrested in a roadhouse raid, he is thrown out of his house by his strict father, and told not to come back until he's made good on his exploits. He and Cynthia split up, and Hugh's grades and sports improve greatly, winning the big football game at the end of the year. But he can't stay away from Cynthia, and they are reunited at the end. Even though the film was a widespread success, the Women's Christian Temperance Union were horrified at the film's portrayal of alcohol consumption as acceptable, since prohibition was in place. They also voiced their opinion on the dance style and jazz music, as behavior which is desperately in need of purification of the cleansing power of holy water. Yes, they had nutters in 1925 as well. My Lady's Lips is a 1925 romantic drama. The plot involves a newspaper publisher. He finds out that his wild daughter has fallen in with a ring of gamblers. A reporter who has infiltrated the gang to get a story falls in love with the female leader. And when the two are caught in a police raid, they find themselves in equal amounts of trouble. 1925 was probably Clara's busiest year. She made 15 films that year, with only a handful surviving. B.P. Schulberg gave Clara her start in Hollywood, but he was a bit of an unscrupulous producer, and 1925 was the year he exploited Clara to the full. Free to Love is a 1925 drama made by B.P. Schulberg. There are a couple of known copies in private collections, but so far, have not been made available to the public. A young woman, Marie Anthony, played by Clara Bow, is released from the reformatory where she was unjustly sent. She starts a new life with a judge, and an idealistic young minister. But a gang of criminals have made plans that could destroy the new life that she has built for herself. The Best Bad Man is a 1925 Western. Directed by John Blyston. She was loaned out, but this is the first time Clara would work for Fox Pictures, until the last two films at the end of her career. To the best of my knowledge, this is the only Western she ever appeared in. This is another film that is in a private collection, and not available to the public. Hugh Nichols, played by Tom Mix, is a wealthy tenderfoot who doesn't take life too seriously. That is until it is demanded that he complete a dam on his property that was promised by his father, and is necessary for a score of ranches. Hugh has already sent money for this project, but he finds out his agent is a crook, and he then steals his own money back. In the meantime he has fallen in love with Peggy, the leader of the ranchers, played by Clara Bow. Dancing Mothers is a 1926 comedy drama, and directed by Herbert Brennan. What makes this film important is, it was Clara's debut for Paramount Pictures. She plays the part of Kittens Westcourt. The role was given to her after the original actress Betty Bronson was rejected for the part by the director, and he insisted the studio cast Clara in the role. The film was adapted from a successful Broadway stage play by Edgar Selwyn. Paramount reportedly bought the rights for $45,000. Dancing Mothers is unique in two ways: its ending, and showing how women have minds and opinions of their own. While most Hollywood melodramas of this period had happy, Pollyanna-type endings, the film strays in a more realistic and refreshing way. The mother, played by Alice Joyce, is tired of being taken for granted. She goes out on her own, and leaves her selfish daughter, played by Clara Bow, and her husband behind. An ending that today's audiences would find quite normal, and certainly not shocking in any way. Audiences in the 1920s expected everything to be tied up in a nice Hollywood ribbon, and all made good in the end. So bravo to Paramount, who chose to have a woman hold her own and stand up for herself, and not giving in to the societal norms of the time and what they dictated. Strong women were not very typical in Hollywood during the silent era of the 1920s. The three films featured here are the only surviving films of Clara Bow from 1926. Kid Boots is a 1926 comedy directed by Frank Tuttle. It is based on a 1923 stage musical of the same name. A complete print is preserved in the Library of Congress. Eddie Cantor was already an established stage star, and actually starred in the 1923 Broadway musical. Paramount signed Cantor to recreate his role for the cameras. It was no sure bet the venture would succeed. Movies were still silent, and much of Eddie's appeal depended on sound. Kid Boots the movie is highly enjoyable, and packs a lot of laughs into its brisk 60-minute running time. The film never wears out its welcome, and Cantor comes off very well in his silent incarnation. Eddie is paired with Clara Bow, now being pushed by Paramount. She is seen here just as her career starts to accelerate. Eddie and Clara make an unexpectedly credible couple, both bright-eyed and exuberant. Kid Boots is a must-see if you're a fan of either of its stars. The plot, as might be anticipated, isn't what you'd call substantial. Eddie, a hapless fellow known as Kid Boots, is rescued from a bully by a handsome playboy named Tom. In return, Kid agrees to help Tom get a divorce from his gold-digging wife. It's made clear that the scheming wife, Carmen Mendoza, tricked Tom into marriage for his money, and she never intended living with him. So, in short, Tom's a decent chap who simply found himself in a spot of trouble. Most of the story takes place at a scenic mountain resort, a setting which allows for gags on the golf course, gags by the pool, and more gags in the lobby. The thin plot is really just an excuse for comedy routines, and happily there are some good ones along the way. The men have found work as a golf instructor and caddy at a country club, while Tom waits for his divorce to become final. There, Mr. Cantor re-encounters pretty swimming instructor Clara McCoy, played by Clara Bow. At the club, Kid falls for Clara, while Tom romances the beautiful Eleanor Belmore, the boss's daughter. Meanwhile, Tom's leggy wife Carmen Mendoza checks into the room next to her husband to cause trouble. This was a successful film for Paramount, as well as all the actors involved. The film is pure cinema, and very enjoyable. It has everything: lots of gags, pretty girls and nice scenery. The film rolls on at a good pace to keep you watching. After seeing this film, it was easy to see how big a star Clara was going to become in a very short period of time. Her moods, expressions and timing are all excellent. And unlike one of her films mentioned earlier, Kid Boots is a film you will want to watch again. Mantrap is a 1926 comedy based on the novel of the same name by Sinclair Lewis. Clara's last couple of films were comedies as well, where most of her earlier films were romantic drama-type films. Paramount and audiences alike saw she was a natural for comedy and comedy romance. Apart from 2 or 3 films a little later, this is the way the studio began casting her, and the way her career would remain until she parted ways with Paramount, for reasons well documented elsewhere. Lewis himself was not a fan of the 1926 adaptation. He and his brother went to a small theater in Pico Lake, where Sinclair was writing. The only film playing was Mantrap. It is written that, following the movie, the manager of the theater had, during the course of the film, recognized his brother, Red Lewis, in the audience. He proudly announced that the author of Mantrap was present, and requested he come on stage to address the moviegoers. Lewis was quick to comply, and he shocked both the manager and the audience by stating he was glad he had read the book, for he would not have recognized it from the film. But even if the author wasn't keen, it didn't really matter, as Mantrap went on to be a huge success for the studio and the star. Directed by Hollywood's top director at the time, Victor Fleming, who went on to direct Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz. Mantrap shows Clara at her lively best, playing the part of Alverna. Being a comedy, she gets to exaggerate a little, something she has already proven herself to be very good at, without being overly theatrical. From the moment Clara enters the scene as Alverna, a bubbly doll of a manicurist, with a severe flirting problem, she steals every scene she is in. Alverna falls for Joe, a simple backwoods man, who quickly makes her his bride and snatches her away to his rustic cabin up north, in a small town called Mantrap. Take Alverna's boredom and flirting addiction, add in Ralph, a New York divorce lawyer running away from city women. And you can see where the story is headed. But it's so much fun to watch it unfold. Despite what the title implies, Mantrap is a rather playful affair that shows the men in Clara's life as becoming exasperated rather than ensnared by her. It's remarkably even-handed though, and she gets to assert her independence in style. But everything considered, Mantrap is just good-natured fun, and is a joy to watch. Children of Divorce was made in 1927, and directed by Frank Lloyd for Paramount, where he was given $1 million budget. The story begins in an American divorce colony in Paris, after the First World War, where parents would leave their children for months at a time. Jean, Kitty, and Ted meet there as children and become fast friends. Years later in America, when a wealthy Ted, played by Gary Cooper, reconnects with Jean, played by Esther Ralston, fall in love, vowing to fulfill a childhood promise to one day marry each other. But true love and the most innocent of plans are no match for the scheming Kitty, played by Clara Bow. She intends to target Ted for his fortune. After a night of drunken revelry, Ted wakes up to find he has unwittingly married Kitty. This unfortunate turn of events, however, carries with it the traumatized pasts of the three players, whose views of marriage have been shaped as children of divorce. A recent release of the film was sourced from the original nitrate negative, which is held by the Library of Congress. As well as their 1969 fine-grain master, this new restoration of Children of Divorce was scanned in 4K resolution, and represents over 200 hours of lab work by the Library of Congress, in order to create the best version possible. Though some deterioration remains, this is the first time the film has been released on home video, allowing audiences to enjoy a rare viewing of classic performances from two of early cinema's most recognizable stars. Originally, after it was finished by Frank Lloyd, Joseph von Sternberg was called in by Paramount to reshoot some scenes, as well as shoot some new scenes altogether. He was then asked to recut the original footage, after executives at Paramount had determined the film was not releasable in its current form. The film is what amounts to an observation on the hazards of divorce, but is not without merit. There are several poignant and sentimental moments which hold up, due to some very competent performances. Clara is at her hedonistic best in Children of Divorce. And as we have all learned, the camera just loves Gary Cooper. He was fortunate to have a voice that matched when talkies came in a couple of years later. To sum up, Children of Divorce is the kind of old-fashioned morality tale that is unlikely to be remade today. One for fans of the stars. Get Your Man is a romantic comedy produced by Paramount famous Lasky Corporation, and released in 1927. The film was directed by Dorothy Arzner. The Library of Congress holds an incomplete print of the film, missing reels 2 and 3 out of the original 6. Paramount did not renew this film's copyright in 1955, so it is now in the public domain. As a boy, handsome Robert Alban, played by Charles Buddy Rogers, was betrothed to fetching young Simone de Valence, played by Josephine Dunn. 17 years later, the French noble class prepare for Alban's pre-arranged wedding. Albans is sent into Paris to pick up a string of pearls for the bride, and meets sexy Nancy Worthington, played by Clara Bow. Robert continually runs into Nancy, a New Yorker spending her first unchaperoned day in the city. By their third meeting, Robert and Nancy are clearly becoming attracted to each other. They fall in love in a wax museum. Nancy thinks it must be fate. Robert is stricken with Nancy, but feels honor bound to go through with his wedding to Simone de Valence. Sadly, Robert and Nancy part. But Nancy has a plan to get your man. She stages a car accident at Robert's chateau, and ingratiates herself into the family. After learning that Robert's intended wife has a lover, Nancy is more determined than ever to break up the unhappy couple. Even though reels 2 and 3 of this slightly damaged 6-reel feature are lost, it's still a cohesive, enjoyable film. The missing footage contains more of Robert and Nancy romancing in Paris. Then her staged accident at Robert's chateau. The accident and aftermath are certainly missed, but it isn't too difficult to comprehend what's happened. Director Dorothy Arzner and photographer Alfred Gilks capture their stars beautifully. Clara is fresh and playful, and the supporting cast is a treasure chest. Hopefully this film will be saved from any further deterioration. Photoplay magazine gave Get Your Man a positive review, saying the cast in it are all splendid actors. Charles Rogers has a boyish appeal that is winning him many friends. The story may be fragile, but the photography is beautiful, and Clara continues to charm and fascinate. It was rated as one of the best films that year by critics. Clara goes Hawaiian in this 1927 Victor Fleming comedy. This is the second time Paramount have hired the services of Fleming for a Clara Bow film, the first one being Mantrap. Clara plays the part of Hula Calhoun, and the target of Miss Calhoun's affections is a very shocked, and very married, Clive Brooke. The whole thing is really just an excuse to get Clara into grass skirts and wet tops, and that's not something we can complain about. But she sells it, and she steals the film. Clara really hit her stride in 1927, with her days of working for Poverty Row Studios well behind her. She was by now Hollywood's hottest name at the box office, and she was about to deliver some of the biggest and most popular hits of her career. Hula Calhoun is the daughter of Hawaiian pineapple plantation owner Bill Calhoun. She follows the advice of her uncle Edwin, and follows a simple and natural life, far from the social conventions of her family, and she is considered a bit of a wild child who wears pants and rides horses. Courted with the adoration of Harry, a worker on the plantation, Hula prefers a young British engineer, Anthony Haldane, played by Clive Brooke. He came to the island to oversee the construction of a dam on her father's property. However, Haldane is already married. At a party, Haldane tries to keep his distance, but Hula gets drunk and performs the seductive hula dance for him. She manages to provoke him so much that he promises to get a divorce. When his wife Margaret appears, Hula makes a deal with one of the foremen to use dynamite to blow up a certain point of the dam. Thinking that her husband is now ruined, Mrs. Haldane now agrees to a divorce, and the two lovers can now be married. In the opening scene of the film, Hula is shown swimming nude in a stream, and later wearing pants to articulate her sexual desires. The film depicts a modern woman who is located outside the bounds of American civilization, and thus able to act in a so-called uncivilized manner, like the natives who live on the island. Clive Brooke was a good actor, but what were studios thinking about in the 1920s? Consistently casting all these middle-aged men as the one true love of pretty and youthful flappers. Wishful thinking on their part perhaps. Brooke seems a bit uncomfortable with the whole thing, and is a bit more staid than usual. Fortunately, Clara has enough personality and energy for both of them. The film tends to get mixed reviews, which in my opinion is a little unfair, since it's a lot of fun, and some good editing makes sure it goes along at a nice pace, and keeps you watching. It is a 1927 romantic comedy. It's based on the book by Eleanor Glynn, and was originally serialized in Cosmopolitan magazine. This was the film that turned Clara into a superstar, and made her a household name at the same time. It was also the film that gave her the title of the It Girl. The film was considered lost for many years, but a nitrate copy was found in Prague, in the mid-60s. In 2001, it was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress, as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. The plot concerns spunky shop girl Betty Lou Spence, played by Clara Bow. She has a crush on her handsome employer, Cyrus Waltham Jr., played by Antonio Marino, the new manager and heir to the world's largest store. However, they belong to different social classes, and he is already romantically linked to blonde socialite Adela Van Norman, played by Jacqueline Gadsden. But Cyrus's friend Monty notices Betty, and she uses him to get closer to Cyrus. When Betty finally gets Cyrus's attention, she convinces him to take her on a date to Coney Island, where he is introduced to the pleasures of roller coasters and hot dogs, and he has a wonderful time. At the end of the evening he tries to kiss her, she slaps his face, and hurries out of the car and into her apartment. But then peeks out the window at him leaving. The next day, meddling social workers are trying to take away the baby of Betty Lou's sickly roommate, Molly. To protect her friend, Betty bravely declares that the baby is in fact hers. Unfortunately, this is overheard by Monty, who tells Cyrus. Although he is in love with her, he offers her an arrangement, which includes everything but marriage. Shocked and humiliated, Betty Lou refuses. She soon strives to forget the whole episode ever took place, and forgetting Cyrus for the time being. When she learns from Monty about Cyrus's misunderstanding, she fumes, and vows to teach her former beau a lesson. When Cyrus holds a yachting excursion, Betty Lou makes Monty take her along, masquerading as Miss Van Cortlandt. Cyrus at first wants to remove her from the yacht, but he cannot for long resist Betty Lou's it factor. He eventually corners her and proposes marriage, but she gets him back, by telling him she'd rather marry his office boy. Which accomplishes her goal, but breaks her heart. He then learns the truth about the baby. He leaves Monty at the helm and goes looking for her. Monty crashes the yacht into a fishing boat, tossing both Betty Lou and Adela into the water. Betty Lou saves Adela from drowning, punching Adela in the face when she panics and threatens to drown them both. At the end of the film, she and Cyrus reconcile on the anchor of the yacht. Monty and Adela are upset at losing their friends, but it is implied they pursue a relationship of their own as the film ends. The concept of it is generally attributed to Eleanor Glynn. In February 1927, Cosmopolitan published a two-part serial story in which Eleanor Glynn tried to define what it was. She said it's that quality possessed by some, which draws all others with its magnetic force. And it can be a quality of the mind as well as a physical attraction. Clara Bow took that particular crown in 1927, and even to this day, nearly 100 years later, and 57 years after her death, it still belongs to her and nobody has come close to taking it away. Wings, from 1927, is an epic film that runs for a full 150 minutes. A First World War film directed by William Wellman, Paramount provided a huge $2 million budget for it. A record amount ever spent on a film at that time. The script was rewritten by Hope Loring and Louis D. Leighton to write Clara into the film as she wasn't originally cast in it. Paramount saw a huge financial opportunity in doing so. Wellman was hired as he was the only Hollywood director with combat pilot experience during the war. The film was shot in and around Kelly Field, an Army training camp in San Antonio, Texas, between September 1926 and April 1927. Hundreds of extras and some 300 pilots were involved in filming, including pilots and planes of the United States Army Air Corps. Wellman extensively rehearsed scenes for the Battle of St. Mihiel over 10 days, with some 3,500 infantrymen, on a battlefield made for the production on location. Shooting conditions were intense, and Wellman frequently conflicted with military officers brought in to supervise the film. Acclaimed for its technical prowess and realism upon its release, the film became the yardstick against which all future aviation films would be measured. Wings went on to win the Best Picture award at the very first Academy Awards ceremony held in 1929, the only silent film to have done so. Wings was also the first widely released film to show nudity. But only for a few brief frames. It was a case of blink and you'd miss it. In 1997, Wings was selected for preservation, and the film was re-released for its 85th anniversary for a limited run in 2012. The scenes you see here are from the excellent 2017 full restoration, and transfer to Blu-ray by Paramount, a version you must see. Jack Powell and David Armstrong are rivals in the same small American town, both vying for the attentions of pretty Sylvia Lewis. Jack fails to realize that the girl next door, Mary Preston, played by Clara Bow, is desperately in love with him. The two young men both enlist to become combat pilots in the Army Air Service. When they leave for training camp, Jack mistakenly believes Sylvia prefers him. She actually prefers David, and lets him know about her feelings, but is too kind-hearted to turn down Jack's affection. Jack and David are billeted together. Their tent mate is Cadet White, played by a young Gary Cooper making his screen debut. But their acquaintance is all too brief. White is killed in an air crash the same day. Undaunted, the two men endure a rigorous training period, where they go from being enemies to becoming best friends. Upon graduating, they are shipped off to France, to fight against Imperial Germany. Mary joins the war effort by becoming an ambulance driver. She later learns of Jack's reputation as the ace shooting star, and encounters him while on leave in Paris. She finds him, but he is too drunk to recognize her. She puts him to bed, but when two military police officers barge in while she is innocently changing from a borrowed dress back into her uniform, she is forced to resign and return to the United States. The climax of the story comes with the epic Battle of St. Mihiel. David is shot down and presumed dead. However, he survives the crash landing, steals a German biplane, and heads back to the Allied lines. By a tragic stroke of bad luck, Jack spots the enemy aircraft, and bent on avenging his friend, begins an attack. He is successful in downing the aircraft, and lands to retrieve a souvenir of his victory. The owner of the land where David's plane crashed, urges Jack to come to the dying man's side. He agrees, but becomes distraught when he realizes what he's done. Before David dies, he forgives his comrade. The film premiered at the Criterion Theatre in New York, and ran for 63 weeks. At the first ever Academy Awards, the award won by Wings was the highest honor that could be awarded. The statuette, not yet known as an Oscar, was presented to Clara Bow by Douglas Fairbanks on behalf of the producers. (1928). In this year Clara made 4 films, unfortunately none of them have survived. This is surprising really, as 1927 and 1928 were arguably the 2 years that Clara peaked as the biggest name at the box office. Those 4 films were Red Hair, Ladies of the Mob, The Fleet's Inn, and 3 Weekends. I had to remove the video I had here, which only ran for 2 to 3 minutes, as it was blocked by YouTube after a claim for breach of copyright from Universal. I removed the original movie audio, and overlaid with music and commentary, but Universal still took great exception to any part of this film being posted. The Wild Party from 1929 is the second Clara Bow film directed by Dorothy Arzner, and pairs her up with Frederick March this time. The Wild Party was Clara's first talkie. She was very nervous of the transition to talkies, which all the studios were taking up, as silent films were fast becoming a thing of the past. It's true she had to reshoot a few of her scenes in her first talkies. She had got into the bad habit of glancing up at the microphone, which was on a long boom arm above her head. A habit she got out of as quickly as she got into. Another thing that worried her was her accent, since she was from Brooklyn, New York. Something she never had to worry about. Contrary to what you may have read elsewhere, audiences took to it fondly. Apart from a couple, critics took to it as well, but the couple who didn't, had been criticizing her films for the past 3 years anyway. The film's plot is centered around an all-girls college, where students are more interested in partying and having fun, than studying. Stella Ames, played by Clara Bow, was a bit of a loudmouth. When the young and handsome Professor Gilmore starts working there, all the girls feel attracted to him. Stella recognizes him as the man she once accidentally shared a bed with, thereby risking her reputation. The professor is unamused by the girls' behavior, and doesn't seem to notice who Stella is. At the end of term, a traditional costume party is held. Stella and her friends turn up in revealing costumes, and are thrown out by Faith Morgan, head of the student body. The girls then decide to go to a bar, but are soon bothered by drunken men. They try to leave, but the men refuse to let them go. A bar fight ensues, and all the girls manage to get away with the car, but Stella is left behind. Fearing for the worst, she plays along with the men, so they will not force themselves on her. She is eventually rescued by Professor Gilmore, who beats up the men. While taking her home she tries to show her gratitude, but he is not impressed, by pointing out her scandalous lifestyle and lack of ambition. Hurt, she starts crying, but Gilmore states he would still kill for her, and kisses her. Eva, from her class, catches them and starts gossiping. But Stella threatens to ruin her life if she continues to do so. However, the next morning Gilmore acts as if nothing has happened. Upset, she returns to her old lifestyle of wild partying. However, word reaches her that Gilmore has been shot, and this complicates things. The Saturday Night Kid is a 1929 comedy about 2 sisters who both want the same man. Also appearing is Jean Arthur, and in her first talking role, Jean Harlow. The film was based on the 1926 play Love M and Leave M by George Abbott. The film was preserved by the UCLA Film and TV Archive, with funding from Clara Bow biographer David Sten. While Clara plays a fast girl, who's always getting into trouble at work for being late. Jean Arthur is actually the sneak and compulsive gambler, usually with store funds. And she also has a yen for Clara's boyfriend. Charles Selin plays the crooked gambler. Jean Harlow has a few lines as the friend in one scene with Clara and Jean Arthur. Harlow and James Hall would star together in Hell's Angels a few years after this. Edna May Oliver, in her talkie debut, plays the head of personnel, and Frank Ross plays Ken. And that's Bess Flowers trying out the weight-reducing machine. After audiences of the 1920s had become accustomed to seeing Clara portray the carefree flapper, or an aggressive woman out to get her man, this film strays from those formulas. Confined by the limitations of the role of Mame, and the constraints of early sound films, Clara is much more inhibited and restrained in this role. That high-energy personality, and those wonderful facial expressions that I love about her, are absent in this film. Clara would have been much more suited to play the role of Janie, that went to a young Jean Arthur. Dangerous Curves is a 1929 romantic comedy. I rate it among the best of her talkies. This time Richard Arlen is the love interest. He also starred with Clara in 1927's Wings. This was one of 700 Paramount films made between 1929 and 1949, which were sold to Universal for television distribution, and have been owned and controlled by Universal ever since. Pat Delaney, played by Clara Bow, is working in a circus as one of the female bareback riders. She's in love with Harry Lee, an arrogant trapeze artist and the circus's biggest act. He doesn't seem to notice her though, as he is used to being adored by lots of women. He's in a relationship with Zara, a manipulative vamp. Larry's boss tries to warn him about Zara, explaining that he has been incurring a lot of debt since he began dating her, and that his act is no longer as powerful as it was in the past. One day Pat and Larry get acquainted, she intimates she has feelings about him, and that they should do an act together. Although he makes clear his heart belongs to someone else, he convinces the circus manager to give Pat a try on the high wire. Later that day, Pat catches Zara having a date with another man, Tony. When she tells Larry about the affair, he confronts Zara, and threatens to beat up Tony. He's interrupted, and has to perform his act, but is unable to concentrate, and he falls off the high wire. He is taken to hospital, but soon recovers, and then goes missing from the circus. He refuses to come back, and spends his time getting drunk instead. Upon finding out that he's not planning to return to the circus, Pat is determined to convince him to do otherwise. Together they form an act, but it soon becomes clear that Larry has lost his talent. Pat has trouble breaking through his distant behavior, but she convinces him to teach her how to walk a tightrope. During this process, Larry finds his talent again, and urges Zara to come back and work a new act with him. Pat finds out and feels used, and confronts him. She's in tears, and the circus manager tries to comfort her, and offers Pat her own tightrope act. As alcohol gets the better of Larry again, he's unable to do his act, but Pat stands in for him disguised in a clown's outfit. Love Among the Millionaires is a 1930 musical comedy directed by Frank Tuttle. Another of those films that were sold to Universal for TV distribution. This film came out 9 months after the stock market crash of 1929 that began the Great Depression. Hollywood responded to the crash by making many comedies, musicals, and other escapist films. Love Among the Millionaires would be about as escapist as you could get at that time. Yet, with all those aspects, this film just barely makes it out the starting blocks. It suffers from much dead-end vaudeville, a choppy script, and weak production quality. The only good parts are the convoluted storyline near the end, and some scenes of the family running their cafe. Clara had a fairly decent singing voice, and now with the advent of talkies, Paramount had every intention of capitalizing on that fact. But she was sort of coerced into doing it. Clara was less than keen about singing on camera. But that turns out to be one of the highlights of an otherwise mediocre film. Clara plays the part of Pepper Whipple. She lives with her father, Pop Whipple, and her younger sister, Penny. She lives in her family-run railroad cafe, where she works as a waitress. After a chance meeting, she falls for the son of a railroad tycoon, and finds herself hobnobbing with the rich. He invites her to spend some time with him and his family at Palm Springs. It's not a terrible or bad film, it's just not a very memorable one either. True to the Navy is a 1930 comedy, and a very funny one at times, bordering on slapstick. Again directed by Frank Tuttle for Paramount, now owned by Universal. This film is important since it also stars Rex Bell, who Clara goes on to marry the following year. But the main love interest is again played by Frederick March, who plays sharpshooter Bullseye McCoy. Clara plays a San Diego drugstore waitress, who dates a dozen sailors, because their ships are never in port at the same time. But when the entire Pacific Fleet docks for a contest, she's in trouble when they all discover her game. That's when she meets Frederick March, and falls for him. Even though she's nuts about him, when he discovers her reputation, he dumps her. He also thinks she is involved in the illegal betting on the naval artillery games that are coming up. Clara looks great here, with her wild red hair and expressive eyes. Frederick March comes off less well, he seems a bit wooden, and overacting all the time, putting on a tough unnatural accent. A good supporting cast includes Harry Green as the Yiddish boss. Adele Windsor is no-nonsense Maisie, and Ray Cook as Bullseye's friend. Eddie Dunn is excellent as Albert, Jed Prouty is the dance hall manager, and Louise Beavers is the maid. Plus, as said earlier, Rex Bell, Clara's future husband, who plays Eddie. Paramount on Parade is a musical revue that basically has Paramount stars and contract players doing things some had never done on screen and wouldn't do again, including Ruth Chatteron, Stanley Smith, Frederick March, and Buddy Rogers. Clara is singing and dancing in the True to the Navy now number to a group of sailors. Her wedding night, a copy of this film is preserved at the UCLA Film Archive, but is unavailable to the general public. An American movie star, Norma Martin, played by Clara Bow, is vacationing in France, and gets mixed up with a songwriter. But due to some mistaken identity, she winds up getting married to someone she doesn't know. No Limit is a 1931 comedy, one again directed by Frank Tuttle. It is also another of her films owned by Universal. Clara is solid in No Limit, and it's amazing how good at acting and settling into talkie she got. But the script is loose and does her no favors. It's Clara that makes the film worth watching. She's funny and cute as wisecracking theater usherette, Helen Bunny O'Day. She agrees to apartment sit for a friend, and unexpectedly finds the premises serves as a center for illegal gambling. There, she meets suave, but crooked, Doug Thayer, played by Norman Foster. Doug is hot and bothered, and Bunny is head over heels. "I thought you had it," he tells her. Although Bunny had long admired Doug's looks, she is put off by his forwardness. But he pursues her to the altar. Can their marriage survive his underworld ties? The photography by Victor Milner gets No Limit off to a terrific start. The locations are great, especially the gorgeous and swanky Art Deco apartment. Clara seems more self-assured than in previous talkies, with her voice and accent never being a problem, but often her nerves were. The whole film is the Clara Bow show. If it weren't for her starring in it, this film would have been buried under a pile of dust a long time ago, never to be seen again. The story just doesn't make a lot of sense. Thelma Todd is given a small role in it, playing a character that makes even less sense. All in all, the film starts great, with loads of promise, but it falls quickly into mediocrity, with a bizarre script that just doesn't go anywhere. Clara was intent on getting out of the business. An embezzling agent, a hectic work schedule, followed by a nervous breakdown on the set of this film. And that was the final straw for her. After the nervous breakdown, she managed to get out of her contract with Paramount, and broke all ties with them. This was the year she married fellow actor Rex Bell, and they intended retiring to his ranch. But Fox Pictures persuaded her to do 2 films for them, for $250,000. She saw that as a nice nest egg for her and Rex. Kick-In is a 1931 drama. It is based on a 1914 Broadway play by Willard Mack. Ex-con Chick Hughes, played by Regis Toomey, tries to go straight with the help of his wife Molly, played by Clara Bow. But circumstances force the couple into involvement in a serious crime. Call Her Savage was Clara's first film for Fox in the 2-film deal. It is a 1932 drama directed by John Francis Dillon. It was also one of the first films to show a scene inside a gay bar. The plot concerns a wild young woman, Nasa Springer, played by Clara Bow. She was born and raised in Texas by well-to-do parents, but she rebels against her father. Nasa is sent to school in Chicago, where her disruptive behavior marks her as a troublemaker. She marries a rich playboy, who then declares the marriage a ploy and abandons her. She is renounced by her father, who tells her he never wishes to see her again. Nasa discovers she is pregnant and has a child. Reduced to poverty, she moves into a boarding house with her infant, and she struggles to pay for the baby's basic needs. Unaware that her grandfather in Texas has died and left her a $100,000 fortune. A desperate Nasa dresses up as a prostitute, and goes out into the neighborhood hoping to earn some quick cash for medicine for her child. While she is out, a drunken lout drops a match, and accidentally sets the building on fire, killing her baby in the process. Upon learning that her mother is dying, she hurries home to Texas. There she learns that she is a half-breed, half-white and half-Indian. The assertion is made that this is why she had always been untamable and wild. This knowledge of her lineage would supposedly allow her the possibility for happiness in the arms of a handsome young Indian named Moonglow, played by Gilbert Roland, a longtime friend who had secretly loved her. This is quite possibly Clara's finest performance, and arguably her best film. The film was given rave reviews everywhere upon its release. With the daily film writing, looking like $1 million, acting better than she ever did, and playing a role that requires her to play pretty near all the feminine moods, Clara Bow makes a whirlwind comeback. The film attracted audiences of over 900,000 when it showcased in the first 42 cities. Hoopla is a 1933 comedy drama directed by Frank Lloyd. This film is also Clara's swan song. Apart from a couple of short newsreels, she never appears on screen again. It is based on the 1928 play The Barker. A version restored by the Museum of Modern Art was shown at the 2011 Classic Film Festival in Hollywood. This was the last of her films in the Fox deal, and certainly brings out her best acting talent. The plot revolves around the sheltered and educated Chris Miller, played by Richard Cromwell, who is the son of Nifty Miller, played by Preston Foster. Nifty is the manager of a traveling circus, and Chris shows up unexpectedly to visit his father. Nifty wants him to turn around and go back to school. Nifty is reluctant to let him hang around circus folks. However, he is allowed to stay and work for a while. But this means that some things are going to have to change, like Nifty and his girlfriend Carrie will have to cool it for a bit. Carrie doesn't take that at all well, and in anger, she pays worldly hoochie coochie dancer Lou a visit, played by Clara Bow. Carrie asks Lou to seduce Chris, and lure him away from his father. She offers Lou $100 if she'll do it. Lou tries her best, and sometimes shocks naive Chris, like when she goes skinny dipping in a pond. However, instead of taking him for a chump, she ends up falling in love and coming clean with him. And he proposes marriage. Lou thinks she's not good enough for Chris, and so does Nifty. So they sneak off and get married. Needing money to leave the circus, Lou hits up Carrie for the rest of the money she promised, threatening to tell Nifty if she doesn't pay. They gather enough money for her to leave, but not before an angry Nifty can throw him out, and tell them never to come back. Lou and Chris head for Chicago and the World's Fair, where Lou dances, and Chris works in a law office. Having fallen on hard times, Lou secretly arranges for Nifty to be the barker for her dancing act. Lou knows Chris won't be happy until he makes up with his father. Nifty isn't happy, but Chris explains that Lou has been making it possible for him to learn law, while she supports them with her dancing. In the end, Nifty realizes Lou is okay, and forgives them both. But is her last film any good? Well, yes, it is actually. But as Clara has done in the past, her performance has turned a mediocre script with an average story into a very enjoyable film. Fox were trying to push the boundaries in 1933, with skinny dipping, and Clara's revealing outfit used in her dancing. Which, if truth be told, couldn't have weighed more than a wet sock. As a year later they would never have gotten away with that. In mid-1934, the Motion Picture Association brought in strict self-censorship, known as the Hays Code. All films became very tame for the next 5 years, but censorship was not popular, and began to loosen in 1939 when the war started.